I never liked pools. Maybe it was because I never learned to swim, or maybe because water never felt like it welcomed might always swallowed. But that day, on my 74th birthday, I stood beside the shimmering blue rectangle in my son Jacob's backyard, smiling politely as guests sipped lemonade and traded stories that had little to do with me. They were all his friends, his in-laws, and their perfect kids, buzzing like bees around him. I stood at the edge careful, distant, invisible, until he made me visible. Jacob came up behind me like a child who never learned boundaries, like the boy I used to bathe and cradle, now towering over me with too much beer and too little respect. His voice cracked through the afternoon like a whip. "Cool off, Mom." And then I felt eat a shove. Not hard, but unexpected. My knees gave way. The concrete disappeared from beneath my sensible shoes, and the world turned blue. Laughter. Screams of delight. The splash soaked the patio. I didn't scream. Not once. I came up coughing, gasping, blinking away chlorine and shock. My arms clutched the pool edge. My good wrist throbbed. Someone clapped. A phone recorded. "Come on, Mom, lighten up." Jacob chuckled, holding out a towel like a prize. I took it without a word, dragging myself out slowly, like a seal chased from shore. My dress clung to every curve of age I tried to hide. I could feel the eyes, the smirks, the pity, the disgust. I sat in a deck chair far from them all, water dripping down my legs like shame. And still nobody apologized. That night, I lay in the guest room they'd assigned me, beneath a painting of a sailboat that had never touched wind. I heard the late-night murmurs through the walls, Jacob and his wife laughing at TikTok videos, one of which, I feared, included me. At least 2 of the grandkids had phones out during the fall. I touched my neck where the bruise had begun to bloom. Nothing serious, I told myself. Just pride. But pride can kill. I didn't come down for breakfast. I wanted to give them a moment to reflect, to wonder, to maybe realize. No one knocked. No one brought coffee, like Jacob used to do when he was 10 and I had the flu. The silence downstairs was more insulting than the push. I waited until noon before packing my small suitcase. I left the birthday card unopened on the dresser. But when I stepped out of the room and onto the staircase, that's when it hit me literally. Pain, sharp and fast, sliced through my chest like a betrayal. I clutched the railing, tried to breathe. The world spun. I called out once, maybe twice. Then everything went dark. I woke up in a hospital bed 2 days later. Monitors beeped in calm contradiction to the chaos inside me. My left arm was swollen within 4. My chest ached, not from a heart attack, but from a stress-induced spasm the doctors called Takotsubo syndrome, broken heart syndrome, they said. I had read about it. Mostly in widows. Mostly in women who had no more reason to go on. Jacob was there, beside the bed, red-eyed and stiff. I didn't know it would, Mom. I was just messing around. I looked at him. Really looked. He was 42. Full head of hair. A good job. A house with a pool. And still so far from being the man I had raised him to be. "I know," I said. "That's what hurts." He started to cry then. Quiet, shallow tears, the kind that never learned how to reach the soul. I turned away and stared at the window where the morning sun split through plastic blinds, creating bars across my body like a prison. When I got discharged, Jacob offered to take me home. I declined. Instead, I called Miriam, my neighbor, who drove 2 hours to pick me up with warm soup in a thermos and silence that didn't need apology. At home, my small kitchen felt enormous in its solitude. I looked at the picture framed by the sink, me and Jacob, Christmas 1999. He was in college then, his arm wrapped around my shoulder, both of us laughing with closed eyes. I took it down and placed it face down in the drawer. Then I sat with my tea and asked myself a question no mother ever wants to ask. At what point does love for a child become self-destruction? That week, the video hit the internet. Someone tagged it. Granny takes a dive. It went viral for about a day. The comments were cruel. Tough old bird. She probably needed the bath. Others laughed at my flailing arms. It was Jacob who took it down. Or so he claimed. But once something is out there, it never really disappears. Neither do the bruises. 3 days later, a letter arrived. "Dear Mom, I don't know where to start. No words feel right. I messed up. You didn't deserve any of that, not the shove, not the laughter, not the silence after. I've been thinking about it nonstop. About what kind of man pushes his mother into a pool. About how far I've fallen from the boy you raised. I thought I was being funny. But it wasn't funny. It was cruel. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can I come by? Just to talk. No jokes. No pretending. Just me. Your son. Jacob. I read it twice. Then a third time. Then I burned it. Forgiveness is a sacred thing. It shouldn't be begged for. It should be earned. And some things can't be undone with ink and paper. The days that followed were quiet. Not peaceful quiet. There's a difference. Peace is when your soul rests. Quiet is when you stop talking because there's no one left who listens. I spent my mornings on the porch, hands wrapped around a warm mug, listening to the wind rustle the dying hydrangeas. I had planted them after my husband died, hoping to breathe life into something again. But like most things these days, they bloomed for a season and then forgot how. I didn't return Jacob's texts. He sent a few more. Longer ones. Mom, please. I'm worried. I deserve the silence, but I want to make it right. He even called Miriam to ask if she'd speak to me. She didn't. She just brought over a blueberry cobbler and said, "He's scared." I took a bite and said, "So was I," and no one cared. A week after the hospital, I received another knock. But it wasn't Jacob. It was Claire, my granddaughter. She stood there on the porch in jeans and a university sweatshirt, fidgeting like she had when she was little and trying to confess breaking my garden gnome. "Hi, Grandma." Her voice cracked. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, softer than I meant to. I wanted to come to say I'm sorry. She looked down. I laughed too. "I didn't know it hurt you. I thought I don't know what I thought." I nodded, but I didn't say it was okay. Because it wasn't. She sat beside me. "Dad's not himself. He's weird. Defensive. Quiet. I think he's embarrassed. But mostly I think he's scared you'll never speak to him again." I didn't know silence could be so loud. I whispered. Claire looked at me then, really looked, and in her eyes I saw a flicker of the boy Jacob once was, gentle, curious, tender. "He told us stories about you, you know," she said. "About how you worked 3 jobs to keep him in school. About how you once walked 5 miles in the rain because your car broke down, but you still made it to his recital. He said no one ever loved like you." I blinked back tears. Claire reached over and took my wrinkled hand. "He knows he failed you," she said. "But he's not giving up." That night, I sat on my bed and stared at my old sewing kit. It was faded, the zipper barely worked, but it still held the needles I once used to fix Jacob's soccer socks, his Halloween capes, his graduation sash. He hadn't asked me to sew anything in decades. But now, I wondered, could I stitch back a wound deeper than cloth? I picked up my phone. My fingers hovered. Then I typed, "Come by Friday. 3 p.m. No audience. No jokes. Just you. Mom." Friday came cold. Summer was leaving too quickly, like everyone else in my life. At 3 o'clock sharp, Jacob's car pulled into the gravel. He stepped out slowly, carrying nothing but an old envelope. He wore a button-down shirt I hadn't seen in years, the one I bought him for a cousin's wedding. He looked older, smaller. I opened the door before he could knock. He didn't smile. Neither did I. He stepped inside, sat on the same couch where, once upon a time, he watched cartoons with sticky fingers and cereal breath. "Thanks for letting me in," he said. I nodded. There was silence. Then Jacob reached into his pocket and pulled out the envelope. Inside was a photo and him at his high school graduation. I had forgotten that picture. I looked alive. He was beaming, his arms around me like I was a prize he'd won. "I've been carrying it around," he said, "trying to remember who I was, who you were." I studied the photo. Then I looked up. "What changed?" I asked. "When did you stop seeing me as a person?" Jacob's throat tightened. He looked down. "I don't know," he whispered. "I think I started seeing you as someone who'd always be there, no matter what. Unshakable. Safe to joke with. Safe to take for granted." He met my eyes. "But when I saw you in that hospital bed, so small, so hurt, I saw what I did. I saw what I became. And I hated him." I didn't cry. Not yet. He continued. "I didn't mean to humiliate you. I thought you'd laugh. I thought I was being playful. But I was being selfish. And cruel. I forgot that you're not invincible. That you deserve dignity." I closed my eyes. Words carried weight, but sincerity gave them gravity. "You laughed," I said. "I know. You watched me claw my way out of that pool. I know. You didn't help. I should have. I hate myself for it." I opened my eyes. "Good." He blinked. Surprised. "Because if you didn't hate yourself, I'd still hate you." We sat in silence. the kind that mends or breaks. Then I spoke. I raised you to be kind, to be aware, to be better than the men who laugh at women's pain. You did, he said quietly. I forgot. I stood slowly and walked to the side table. I took out a folded towel, the same one he handed me after the fall. I had washed it, folded it, kept it. I placed it in his lap. Keep this, I said. Let it remind you. Jacob swallowed hard. He didn't speak. Then, after a long pause, he said, Will you ever forgive me? I don't know, I answered honestly. But I'm willing to try. That was enough. It had to be. That Sunday, Jacob came again. This time with Claire. No grandkids. No phones. Just a tray of pastries and 2 cups of my favorite tea. We didn't talk about the pool. We talked about books. About my hydrangeas. About his work. The healing wasn't fast. But it had begun. Every family breaks. The lucky ones learn how to rebuild. 2 weeks after that Sunday, I received a letter. Handwritten. No stamp. Jacob must have dropped it in my mailbox himself. It read, Mom, I've started going to therapy. I didn't want to tell you too soon in case it sounded like I was trying to earn points. I'm not. I'm trying to understand why I act like a boy when I'm supposed to be a man. I told the therapist about the pool. She said something that hit me. She said, humor without empathy becomes cruelty. I sat with that for a long time. I want to be someone you're proud of again. Not just because I'm your son, but because you deserve a son worth loving. If there's ever anything you want to tell me, anything, I've never let you say, I'll listen. I promise. Love. Jacob. I placed the letter on the kitchen windowsill, beside the basil plant that never grew quite right. And for the first time in a while, I whispered into the stillness. I'm proud of you for writing that. And I meant it. Healing is not a staircase. It's a spiral. Some days I feel strong. Other days, the sound of splashing water makes my spine tense. But Jacob began coming by every Friday. Not to check in, just to be here. We worked in the garden together. I taught him how to repot the azaleas. He brought me lunch from that little Vietnamese place I love, the one I hadn't been to since before the fall. And one day, he surprised me with a memory. Do you remember when I was 9? He said, wiping dirt from his hands. And I got stung by a bee at summer camp, and you drove 3 hours just to bring me my stuffed bear? Of course, I smiled. You cried until I got there. I still have that bear. That stopped me. You do? He nodded. It's in the attic. Claire found it last year. She thought it was hers. We both laughed. Genuinely. Not the brittle kind that comes with apology, but the kind that repairs. But not all wounds heal at the same pace. Because just when I thought the worst was behind us, I got a call from a friend at church. Lucille, dear, she said, hesitant. Have you seen this? She sent me a link. The video. Again. Reposted on another platform. Same title. Same angle. Same splash. This time, the comments were worse. Cruder. And someone had slowed it down for effect, adding circus music in the background. It had over 2 million views. My heart sank. It took all my strength to press play, to relive that moment of humiliation. And this time, it felt even worse because just as I was starting to reclaim myself, the world shoved me back under. I called Jacob. He came within the hour. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I just turned the phone toward him and said, It's back. He stared at it, pale, jaw clenched. I took it down, he said. I swear, Mom. I never reposted it. I wouldn't. I believe you. His eyes met mine, almost in disbelief. You do? I do. But belief didn't soften the sting. Jacob spent the next few days chasing down the source. He reached out to his friends, the party guests, even the kids who might have recorded it. Finally, he discovered it had been one of his co-workers, Simone, he barely knew, who thought it was hilarious and had saved the video before Jacob deleted it. Jacob demanded it be removed, threatened legal action. Eventually, it disappeared. But I still saw it, burned into the back of my mind. The splash, the silence, the laughter. I didn't speak for a few days after that. Not because I was angry, but because the wound had split open again. Sometimes silence isn't punishment. It's survival. Jacob gave me space, brought groceries, watered my plants, sat on the porch, reading, just to be near. I didn't tell him to go, but I didn't say much, either. Until one day, I found him repairing the back gate, the one that had always stuck. You don't have to do that, I said quietly. I know, he replied. I want to. We stood there a moment, me in my slippers, him holding a rusty hinge. Mom, he said. I've spent so much time trying to make you laugh, and I think I forgot how to make you feel safe. I looked at him. That same little boy face beneath a man's scruff and weariness. You're starting to, I said. Weeks passed, then months. Fall arrived with crisp mornings and golden light that made everything look like a memory. Jacob invited me to Thanksgiving at his house. I hesitated. The pool was still there, still blue, still waiting. I understand if you say no, he said. But if you come, we'll cover the pool. Completely. I want you to feel safe. I said yes. Not because I was ready, but because if I waited to feel brave, I might never show up. Thanksgiving was warm, strange, familiar. Claire greeted me with a hug that lingered. The younger kids were gentler, like they knew not to shout or run too close. And true to his word, the pool was covered with a thick, dark tarp. On top of it, Jacob had set up a table of desserts. I figured we could reclaim the space, he smiled. Make new memories. I nodded. Dinner was lovely. Laughter this time felt lighter, not sharpened by mockery. Jacob carved the turkey. His wifeless icy than usual passed me the gravy without saying anything cruel. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. After dessert, as guests cleared plates, I wandered toward the edge of the pool cover. I stood there for a long time, arms crossed. Jacob came to stand beside me. Every time I walk out here, I remember, he said softly. But I also remember your face the day you let me back in. I turned to him. I remember your face when you pulled me out of the dark, I said. We stood there together, looking down at the tarp stretched over the water, holding the weight of pies and promises. And I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. That night, after the guests had gone, I stayed behind to help Claire with the dishes. Jacob had taken the younger kids to drop them off at their cousin's house, and for the first time in years, it was just me and Claire in the kitchen. She moved around with the ease of a young woman still unaware of time's cruelty, but there was something heavy in the way she dried the silverware. Finally, she spoke. I watched the video again, she said, not looking at me. I stopped stacking the plates. I had saved it too, she admitted. Not to share, just to remember the party. But I watched it last week, and I saw your face. I never really looked at it before. I was too busy laughing. Her eyes were full of regret. Young regret, but real. I'm sorry, Grandma. I reached out and gently touched her hand. Thank you for telling me. We stood quietly for a while, the hum of the dishwasher the only sound. Then I said, we all do things without thinking. The difference is what we choose to do once we finally do think. Claire nodded. I think Dad's changing. I smiled faintly. So do I. Back at home that night, I found myself staring at my own reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the one who had fallen in the pool. Or maybe she was but different now. Stronger, in a way. Or maybe just more awake. I sat down at the small desk in the corner of my living room and pulled out an old composition notebook. The kind with yellowed pages and a cracked spine. I used to write in it when Jacob was young notes, prayers, thoughts I didn't have the courage to say aloud. That night, I began writing again. November 23rd. I am not just someone's mother. I am not just someone's embarrassment. I am not just a joke in a viral video. I am a woman who survived grief, loneliness, shame, and came out clearer on the other side. I am still becoming, still learning, still worthy of respect. I closed the notebook, pressed my hand against its cover, and for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. A few days later, Jacob surprised me again. I've signed us up for a painting class, he said. Hey, what? Painting. You used to sketch, remember? I was never any good. That's not the point. I laughed softly. You're really going all in on this redemption arc, aren't you? He grinned. Maybe. Or maybe I just want to spend time with you that has nothing to do with pain. That Tuesday, we sat side by side in a community center full of retirees and middle-aged hobbyists. The instructor handed out brushes and asked us to paint something that reminded us of belonging. I froze for a moment. Then I dipped my brush in blue. I painted water, but not the kind that drowns. The kind that holds. A lake at dusk. Still. Quiet. Peaceful. Jacob painted a house. It looked like mine. By Christmas, things had changed between us. Not drastically, but enough. He called more. Asked how I was before telling me how he was. He started bringing me things unprompted: apples, new yarn, old photos from his attic. One afternoon, he brought a box of VHS tapes and a dusty player. Remember these? Oh Lord, I said, those are older than Claire. We spent that evening watching grainy videos of birthday parties, dance recitals, and Jacob's 10th Christmas where he screamed after getting a red bike and hugged me so hard I nearly fell backward. Watching it, I noticed something. In every video, I was always on the edge of the frame. Cleaning, serving, smiling, fading, always present, never centered. Jacob noticed too. "Why aren't you in more of these?" he asked. "Because someone had to hold the camera." He looked at me for a long time. "Not anymore," he said. "That winter, we started a tradition, Sunday soup night. Sometimes it was just us. Sometimes Claire came too. We'd eat and talk and play cards or reminisce. Sometimes we just sat quietly and listened to old records." One Sunday in January, as snow fell outside and Jacob scraped the last of the stew from his bowl, he said something I'll never forget. "You gave me so many chances in life," he said. "I gave you so few, but I'm not wasting this one." I nodded, too moved to speak. Some people come back into your life as echoes. Others come back determined to rebuild every broken wall. Jacob was doing the rebuilding, brick by brick. In early March, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single printed page. Typed. No signature. I saw the video. I laughed at it. Then I found out who you were. I've never met you, but I wanted to say this. I'm sorry for laughing. I didn't think. I just clicked. Now I think. Thank you for making me think. A stranger. I stared at the letter for a long time. The world had mocked me, but it had also watched. And someone out there, someone I would never meet, had shifted because of what they saw in my eyes. Maybe pain, when carried with dignity, can teach, can ripple. I folded the letter and placed it next to Jacob's first apology. Not all wounds scar the same. Some turn into windows. Spring arrived with its usual quiet magic, buds pushing through soil, birds returning with songs I hadn't heard in months, and the gentle return of warmth to my bones. One morning, I found myself opening the windows, letting the air in, breathing deeply like I was relearning how. Jacob had taken to calling every evening around 6. Not out of guilt now, but rhythm. Sometimes he didn't have much to say. Sometimes I didn't either. But the calls mattered. They were a bridge. A small one, maybe, but strong enough to cross. One Thursday, he asked, "Can I take you somewhere this weekend? Just you and me." I hesitated. "Where?" He paused. "Somewhere we haven't been in years." Saturday came, and we drove. The car hummed beneath us, the windows down. I watched the trees blur past, Jacob's hands on the wheel steady now. He didn't fidget like he used to. He looked straight ahead, like a man with a destination not just in miles, but in meaning. After an hour, we pulled into the gravel lot of the lake house. I gasped. "Jacob, you haven't been back since Dad died," he said gently. The lake shimmered in the sun, just like it used to. The boathouse was still there, though weathered. The porch swing creaked in the breeze. My chest ached with memory. "I thought it might be good," he said, "to remember. Together." We walked slowly along the edge of the lake. I told him stories he'd forgotten, how his father used to skip rocks perfectly, how we'd burn marshmallows on purpose just to laugh. Jacob listened, hands in pockets, his eyes soft. "I never really saw you grieving," he said quietly. "You held it all." "I had to," I said. "You were too young to carry it." "I'm not young anymore," he said. "And I want to carry some of it now." He meant it. I could feel it. And that's when I realized something I hadn't dared believe before. He wasn't just sorry. He had changed. We stayed at the lake house that night. It was cold, but cozy. We cooked together grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, like we used to. He found an old box of cassette tapes, and we laughed listening to his voice as a 7-year-old reciting the alphabet with dramatic flair. Before bed, I stood on the dock, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. Jacob came out and joined me. "I used to think you were unbreakable," he said. "That's why I never asked how you were doing after Dad died. I thought strong people didn't need help." "Strong people need help the most," I said. "They're just the best at hiding it." He looked up at the sky. "I see that now." We stayed there a long while, saying nothing more, just letting the night fold around us. There's a kind of healing that doesn't come from words. Just presence. Shared space. The silence of understanding. The next morning, we packed up. Before we left, I tucked one of my husband's old flannel shirts into Jacob's duffel. "He would have wanted you to have it," I said. Jacob held it with quiet reverence. "Thanks, Mom." On the drive home, we didn't talk much. But there was no tension, just peace. And that I thought, was the real miracle. In April, I went to church again. The first time since the pool incident. There were stares. Some kind, some curious, some laced with quiet judgment. But I walked in with my head high. During fellowship, a woman approached me, Judith, from the choir. She took my hand. "We all saw what happened, Lucille," she said softly. Some laughed. I didn't. I just didn't know what to say. "It's okay," I told her. "Silence is understandable. But staying silent forever isn't." She nodded. "You're brave." I smiled. "I'm just tired of pretending I'm not human." That same week, Claire invited me to speak at her women's studies class at the university. "They're doing a unit on dignity and age," she explained. And I told my professor about what happened. She asked if you'd be willing. At first, I resisted. Why would I open the wound again? But then I realized I wasn't reopening it. I was showing the scar. And scars, as I told Claire, mean you healed. So I stood in front of 20 young women, and I told them everything. Not just about the fall, but the years before it. The work, the love, the erasure, the strength. When I finished, the room was silent. Then a girl in the back raised her hand. "Do you forgive him?" she asked. I paused. "Yes," I said, "because I finally believe he sees me now. And because holding on to anger hurts me more than it teaches him." Another student asked, "What advice would you give your younger self?" I didn't hesitate. "Speak up sooner. You're not a burden. You're a person." The next Sunday, we covered the pool again. This time, permanently. Jacob and I decided to turn it into a Gardena living space. He even built a bench where the diving board used to be. "It's good soil under there," he said. "Something better can grow." We planted roses, lavender, and tomatoes because I always wanted to grow them, even if the squirrels kept stealing them. On Mother's Day, he brought me a frame. Inside was a photo. Me, sitting by the garden, holding a teacup, smiling in sunlight. The caption read, "Not just someone's mother. Someone." I cried when I read it. Not because I was sad, but because I finally felt seen. That summer, I received a letter from the local paper. They wanted to interview me for a feature on elder dignity and social media. I agreed. The article was titled, "What Happens After the Laughs? A Mother's Story." It sparked conversation. Some emails were cruel, but many weren't. Many were from daughters and sons, strangers and caregivers, who said, "I see my mother differently now. I've called my grandmother. I'm sorry for the way I treated the women who raised me." Jacob read each one with me. "Maybe," he said, "something good came of it." I nodded. "Maybe something beautiful." The night before my 75th birthday, Jacob invited me to dinner. But when I arrived, it wasn't just dinner. It was a gathering. Friends, family, neighbors, even my old co-workers. There was music, candles, flowers everywhere. But no pool, only garden. When it came time for speeches, Jacob stood. He looked nervous. Then he cleared his throat. "A year ago," he said, "I made a mistake that could have ended my relationship with the most important woman in my life. But instead of leaving, she taught me. Instead of shouting, she waited for me to listen. And when I finally did, she forgave me." He turned to me. "Mom, you gave me life more than once. I hope I've earned a place in yours again." I stood, walked to him, took his hand. "You have," I said. Then, for the first time since that awful day, I hugged him without hesitation. The room applauded. But I didn't hear them. All I heard was my heart, steady again. I went home that night and wrote one final entry in my notebook. 1 year later. I am not a victim. I am not a punchline. I am not fragile. I am a woman with roots, with voice, with value. And today, I feel more alive than I ever have.